Good morning, partners in crime. It's great to have you with us today. We have with us Tina. Can you pronounce your name for me? I always get that wrong.
deBellegarde. It's easier than it seems.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's terrific. Um, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tina. Her debut novel, Winter Witness, was nominated for an Agatha Award for Best First Novel. Dead Man's Leap, the second book in the series, was nominated for an Agatha Award for Best Contemporary Novel. And reviewers have called Tina the Louise Penny of the Catskills, which is so cool. Now, you also write short stories and flash fiction, and your story, Tokyo Stranger, was nominated for a Derringer Award. And this is like everything you write gets like nominated for awards. It's so cool.
No, but I have to admit, I'm very, very honored and pleased that they've gotten some recognition. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of not what I expected, and it's wonderful.
It's been terrific. Yeah. Now, you co chair the Murderous March Conference, and that is in the
It's
New England area.
it's in the Upper Hudson Valley. We're part
Mhm.
of the Sisters in Crime chapter, Upper Hudson Valley Sisters in Crime chapter, and we are located in Albany. We started in person, but now we're an all virtual conference.
Okay.
And it's every other year. In fact, we're establishing the date for the next one. I think in 2 weeks we're having our first meeting for the upcoming one. So you will hear more about that.
Oh, that's exciting. And that'll be in 2026?
Well, that's one of
Or
the things we're considering. It's either 2026 or 2027, but it's going to be alternating years after that.
yeah.
It's a smaller chapter and we've been working so hard at all volunteers. So we're trying to find ways to make it more feasible for us to host this event. And right now I'm co-chairing with Carol Pulio. We've been doing it together
Yeah.
for a while. And we have a terrific committee, Jacqueline Bold. I mean, just so many people on that committee that make it all happen. And like I said, I'll be posting more, and so will the Mavens, the Upper Hudson chapter.
Oh, I'm so excited. Now, you also blog on Sleuths and Sidekicks, and
I
you're a part of
do.
that.
I do. I have three authors I work with. So Carol Pulio, again, Carol and I do everything together. Lisa Sedaris and Jen Collins Moore. When we created the Sleuths and Sidekicks, and we do virtual events together because Lita's in California, Jen is in Chicago, Carol and I are in New York, but we're not near each other in New York. And I'm in Florida for part of the year. So we do everything virtually. In fact, we've never all been in the same room at the same time.
Are
So
you
it's,
serious?
yeah, I'm serious. It's really a lot of fun. And they're a talented group of ladies. I'm very lucky.
Oh, wow. Now, we are here today to talk about your newest release, which is Autumn Embers. And I am so excited. We toured that book and everyone loved it. You have a great sense of character. So, can you tell us a little bit about the entire series as a whole so that we can get a little background on this?
Yeah, so Autumn Embers, the third book in the series, is sort of a little bit of a departure from the whole series, right? So the series is set in the Hudson Valley, the foothills of the Catskill
Mhm.
Mountains, and that's where I'm living now. And so it's kind of part of the reason why it's set there. And the reason it's important is because if it hadn't been for moving there, I'm not sure I would have put this whole thing together. I wanted to write a mystery series. I wanted a female main character, preferably an amateur sleuth. I didn't want to do procedurals. And but I like a slow burn story with a lot of emphasis on character and setting. And so I had ideas, but it just wasn't clicking. When I moved up to the Hudson Valley, I realized just how beautiful a place it is. And I was thinking, oh, this is a nice setting. And the community is just, it's warm, it's small, it's my Mayberry. I always said I wanted to live in Mayberry ever since I was a little girl.
Ah,
And but then I also noticed it's a very dangerous place in some ways, you know. And so I said, this could be all I need, all those little pieces that I need to put together to create this series, right? I always joke about how all the murder possibilities, there are cliffs and there are winding roads and hidden paths and abandoned quarries. You know, there are all kinds of ways that someone can die in a small town like this. So I said, oh, this is starting to come together. So I went home and I happened to be on a walk when it was all clicking. And I remember getting on the phone with my sister saying, I think I got it. I think I got it. And I ran home and I created a map. I put some paper together and started
Yeah.
making a map, and Batavia-on-Hudson is a fictitious village based on like all my favorite aspects of towns in that area. And as I made the map, it started to populate itself with the villagers, starting to think, who would live here and who might run this flower shop and who might, be the librarian or whatever. And then I started to see places they would congregate, the Stella's Diner and, the community center where they might have celebrations or struggles, or, they're the first book they debate over a casino and a condo development and their rivalries. And so all of a sudden the map was really central to creating this village atmosphere, because all of my books, regardless of the storyline, really center on community, and they're central to the mystery plot. Without it, I don't think the mysteries would make any sense, right? They're not just strangers and police that come in and solve the puzzle. There is a puzzle, but it's more about all those dynamics, all those layers underneath. And so with Autumn Embers, we kind of step outside of that village. And I was a little concerned about that because people love the village, right? Just like I love Jessica Fletcher and Cabot Cove. I always preferred the episodes that took place on Cabot Cove, right? So I had to work with trying to make the story go back and forth, and it does, I think, and I'm really happy with that. And so that's like the thread of, I think what ties the stories together mostly is community, and about how there are murders and there are murder mysteries and there's the puzzle, but the murder is sort of a device to get to understand my characters better, because it's sort of a shortcut, right? When you're dealing with murder in a small town, especially, you start to understand people quickly, their motivations, their fears, their insecurities, their aspirations. And it's sort of like a distilled atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love how you have the coffee shop and everybody kind of congregates in the coffee shop. And so then they're all talking, and then your main character, Bianca, writes the stories, and they're all talking about her stories in the coffee shop. So that just pulls it all together.
You're talking about in Autumn Embers when they go
Yeah.
back and forth. Yeah, because so in the other two books, Stella's is really the hub of the town, and everybody congregates there, and that's where gossip passes and all that stuff. So I kept that hub as the place where Eugene, the diner owner, would read the dispatches that she would send about her travels in Kyoto and what was going on, and the things she would reveal and the things she would keep to herself, because they were also dealing with a murder mystery out there, of course.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I tried to tie it back and forth that way. And also in the third book, Mike, the sheriff, who also happens to be Bianca's like maybe love interest, right? We never quite know where they stand.
Yeah.
He has to deal with the sheriff's election. And so as a result, there are whole scenes that take place right in the city of Batavia, in the village of Batavia. And they kind of communicate by phone and ask each other for help, and with their two different problems. So I tried to connect them, and I think it worked out. I think it did. I think it keeps people kind of rooted in the village while being in the new community in Kyoto, Japan. And like I said, community is so much a part of what I write
Yes.
about. In Autumn Embers, I focus not just in the city of Kyoto, but in the expat community of, which is a smaller, more intimate community with more problems, right? Because they're more intimate. They know each other, and there are rivalries, and there are big support systems. But like I said, community.
And the expat community it's something I've actually heard about a lot lately. And I never really had focused on it before, but it's come up more. And it was very interesting the way you pulled them together and showed how connected they are in another country. I didn't realize that they had those connections.
Well, I don't know what it's like in all communities like that, because there are expat communities all over the world, of course. Kyoto, Japan is really a monoculture, and it's like 99% Japanese, native born, and the rest are from all over, a lot from Asia, but also you have that English speaking community. And so what's so interesting to me about the expat community there is that what draws them together is two things. They're away from home in Japan, and they speak English, and that's it. So they're from Australia, they're from England, they're from Ireland, they're from Canada, they're the United States, they're from all over or from other countries, but they also happen to speak some English, luckily, so that they can all communicate. So they have nothing in common but their love of Japan and this English language. So it's kind of interesting how you kind of are drawn to that, to have a support system. So I have a son who lives there now, and he's very much a part of the expat community, and he's very much a part of the local community. He's married to a Japanese woman. And but that expat community is so strong. It's what got you to feeling comfortable to live there, And I don't live in Florida, but I spend many months here in the winter. And I noticed that that's a common theme here too. You have so many transplants in Florida from up north, and people kind of gravitate, to these
Yeah.
friendships, right? So in Autumn Embers, one of the big themes in that story is chosen families, because really what that expat community is a chosen family. This is where they spend their holidays, where they,
Mhm.
you know, it's how they get through the tough parts of being away from home, you know.
Yes.
And they don't have family, so they choose one. And when you think about it, family can be so difficult sometimes, but chosen families are a little bit easier, you at least have some control,
A little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get back to Bianca and
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about her and who she is and what drives Bianca.
Well, I wanted a really strong female character.
Mhm.
And I wanted somebody who was not young. I started writing in my 50s, and I wanted a character I could relate to, the main character, somebody I was going to write about all the time. And I'm going to start off with a silly story that I tell all the time because it really threw me when it happened. I was pitching the book early on before it was even finished. I think it was a Crime Bake. They do like at the Crime Bake conference, they do practice your pitch workshops. So I sat at a round table with an agent I really respected and pitched my story. And she liked it, but when um, I pitched her as a 50-something-year-old person, but I did mention Mike, the sheriff, but I didn't say he was a love interest. So she said, is he going to be a romantic element? I said, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, eventually. And she says, oh, well, then Bianca can't be in her 50s. She has to be romantically viable. That was the word, that the expression, she is romantically viable. And anybody who's ever listened to me speak has heard me tell the story almost every single time, because I was in my 50s and I was just like, I don't really like this conversation at all. So, but I couldn't. She says, put her in her 30s. That's the way to go. And I'm like, no, I
Mhm.
can't. I can't do that, because she has a son, a grown son living in Japan, and it's too much a
Yeah.
part of the story. She's a grieving widow. I just needed to. So I went home and I gave it some thought, and I put her in her 40s. And in
Mhm.
the long run, it gives her room to grow and age in my book. But it did present a few problems, but either way. But I wanted somebody who was sort of wise and had some life experiences, and I, again, going back to Jessica Fletcher and Miss Marple, I wanted people with, some experiences. So I wanted someone at least in her 40s, preferably in her 50s. And I thought about her being married to her soulmate and decided that was just too sweet. And I killed off her husband before the book opens, before book one opens, right? So she's a young widow, and she has to deal with this grief, and I think that's important.
Mhm.
She has several obstacles, right? She's brand new in a town because she and her husband have moved to this town so she could write and he could farm. And then before book one opens, he's passed away. And so she has to fit into this community. She's dealing with her grief. She's trying to launch a writing career. His unexpected death gives her some financial concerns, and so she's got a lot going on. And then she meets Mike, a year into this, and she meets Mike, and she starts to realize that she's kind of unexpectedly attracted to him, and that makes her feel guilty because she hasn't properly grieved yet. So I was trying to write a character who had a lot going on in here. And then besides that, she's a teacher, a former teacher, and like I said, an aspiring writer, and she's a historian. So she's very observant. And when
Mhm.
she moves into the community, when she moves out of her home, because now she's in this cocoon grieving, and she finally decides she needs to step out into the community and like learn to live her life again. She befriends the local historian, who's an aging curmudgeon who's bedridden, and she's, reads to her and gets to know her and helps her out. But she also decides they kind of get along, probably the historical interests, and she's going to fictionalize her story. This woman has lived most of the 20th century, and she has this great, interesting, complicated life. And it's just interesting how she can befriend this woman that nobody can get along with, and how, as an outsider, Bianca has a little bit of more objectivity. So she ends up becoming an amateur sleuth in this book, in this series. It's not a silly series, but she is not a cop, a police,
Right.
a person in authority. But she can do it because she's observant, because she's got an outsider's point of view, and also because, and this was very intentional on my part, the Mayberry thing. I wanted her in a small town, and I wanted her in a small town because, you ask a lot of our readers a little bit of suspension of disbelief, and we do that for a lot of things. But one of the things you have to really be careful of with an amateur sleuth is you don't want it to get too silly, right?
Mhm.
Or you do, depending on the book. But
Right.
these
Yeah.
tend to be serious, but a little lighthearted. Because I want people to enjoy coming to the books. I don't want it's too much tension. I'm not in the mood for that book, right? In a small town, it's not so far-fetched. I live in a town just like Batavia-on-Hudson. It's not far-fetched to know the sheriff and chat and maybe say, well, I saw so-and-so pull out of his driveway at 3 in the morning. I pull out of my neighbor's driveway at 3 in the morning, like stuff like
Yeah.
that. And you end up actually having information that could be useful. Now, I've never done such a thing, but my point is, I feel like it's possible. And
Mhm.
so for me, being in a small town and being involved in an investigation made it perfect for my character, a strong, smart woman, to become an amateur sleuth in a rather serious book.
Yeah, and it really works. Um, so can you tell us a little bit about Winter Witness? That was first, right?
That
Yeah.
is the first one. So
Hmm.
Winter Witness opens with the sheriff at a murder scene, and an old nun, a really beloved woman,
Yeah.
is found dead on the edge of the frozen lake. And the big question is, like, who would kill such a nice person? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. At the same time, like I said, this is when we meet Bianca, when she's getting out into the community. She
Mhm.
meets the historian who gives her all this information about her past for this book she's writing. But what we also learn is that this older woman, Agatha, the historian, the nun who was killed was her only real friend from like all the way from childhood. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I know. So as she's revealing all this stuff about her past, Bianca realizes that she's got pieces of a puzzle that might be insightful into this investigation. So she
Hmm.
starts to like ask around and look around, and she kind of insinuates herself into this investigation. And from that is when she and Mike meet and develop that push-pull relationship. It's a push relationship because she doesn't belong in the investigation, right? And he's got to tell her to like lay off. But on the other hand, she's got pretty eyes and she's smart and she helps. She's like come up with stuff that's very useful. And so the community is also dealing with this tension over the condo and casino possibly coming into the
Hmm.
community. So there's all these kinds of tensions, a small town dealing with murder, and a place and a subject they don't agree on, this kind the development, right? So, and I've seen this happen out in real time. People who are very close on a daily basis who are in complete opposite sides of this argument. It can be very tension filled because you're like family, so that's really where Winter Witness, uh, that's the story. There ends up being a second murder, or a second death. And the question is it a murder or not?
Hmm.
And of course, Bianca's right there, front and center, who happens to have information to help. Um, and by the end of the book, she becomes a little bit more ensconced in the community, a little bit more a part of the locals, not yet called a local, which is really harder than it sounds. One of the things that's nice about these small towns is that they are so welcoming, but it's not as easy to feel a part of them as you might think, you know.
And people still think that you're a transplant even after 20 years because you have not been here forever.
That's right. Many of them have families that have been there for generations. So they don't
Yeah.
see you as a local. They don't. And we live in a community. Excuse me. I live in a community, and so does Bianca, where that is the case, where you are really, you're new. We like you,
Yeah.
but you're new. We'll see.
And new can be a generation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Your family moved here before you were born, but they moved here.
That's right. That's right. And so Dead Man's Leap is just like, it sort of picks up shortly a few months later, where they're getting ready for a charity rummage sale.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are in their attics and basements, and you know what happens when you dig things up. Other things like secrets come up too. And there's a Japanese artifact that doesn't belong in Batavia that turns up. And but in the meantime, there's a huge storm. Everybody's evacuated to the community center, and in these tight quarters, more tensions. And the flood uncovers a corpse, a dealer who had been in town for the auction. And this artifact shows up, and some old bones. So because of Bianca's connection to Japan, because she has the same connection I have a son who lives in Japan. So Bianca
Mm-hmm.
lives in Japan because, write what you know. And because of her connection, she can shed a little light on the artifact. And as a result, she gets more and more involved in this investigation again. And this book is really about letting go of things and moving on. And this is when
Mm-hmm.
she gets to properly grieve finally, so she can move on a little bit. And that moves right into the third book, into Autumn Embers, because she brings that artifact back to Japan and goes back to visit her son.
Yeah, it was amazing to me how closely entwined the books are, but how completely standalone they are. That was really a lot of talent that you did that.
Thank you. You really want them to be standalone because you never know
Hmm.
where somebody's going to start, but it's hard. It is hard to make them standalone because you still want them to be connected. So
Right?
it's a challenge, but it's fun.
Yeah, I really liked the relationships between the people. Um, and the way you brought up chosen family throughout. But I do want to ask, is there a story behind the title of Autumn Embers?
It's so interesting because if you remember in my books, there is Olivia Last, the editor of the Gazette, always writes
Hmm.
a weekly column, and in it, it is if you read it carefully, you'll see it's the themes of the book,
Yeah.
and and the title, usually the title of the book, right? So in Autumn Embers, she talks about getting together for the bonfire and how we can
Yes.
learn things about the people we love, that we call our chosen families, who have maybe transgressed, but we can learn to live with everybody, and how that gathering around the fire is really a place of support, and how we can all be there for each other despite these challenges. And then in Autumn Embers, I'm sorry, in the Kyoto sections of the book, Bianca, in autumn, there are a lot of fire festivals in Kyoto. So she attends two of them, and they both have a real effect on her as
Mhm.
far as emotions, and it helps her kind of understand where she sits with a few issues, like her son staying behind and stuff. And
Yeah.
it kind of just emphasizes the warmth of your chosen family. It's just me overthinking everything.
Well, there's some really profound statements in there that really impact you as you're reading them because they apply no matter where you are. One of them was, I think, Mike talking, and it says, "We all have a past. We all have made mistakes. Every one of us. Let's not define ourselves by our failures."
Hmm.
I mean, no matter where you are, that's something that just really impacts. Um,
Well, I hope so, because I think that's true. I think that statement is true, and we cannot be pigeonholed. We need to keep moving forward. We have to keep making progress, and we have to learn from our mistakes. And as a small community, your mistakes tend to impact a lot of people too.
mhm.
And so you need to come to terms with them yourself, your own failures, and you need your community to do so as well, your families and your community, whatever that is, chosen family, right?
Yeah. So you spent a lot of time in Kyoto because of your son. So can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to do the research for this book?
Oh, it's the best research in the world. I just keep going back. So he's been living there for 15 years, and I've traveled there about 7 times.
Mhm.
And I go for lengths of time, like a month or 6 weeks, so I really feel immersed. And so that's the main uh, way I do my research. I belong to a writing group there. I have lots of friends now over the years. These are people I can ask questions to. I've even done interviews like this so that I can ask like my list of questions. I have a cultural reader, the woman who does my cover,
Oh,
for this
beautiful.
book, yeah, and the map. She read the book for language, cultural
Yeah.
appropriateness, and even things like she picked up, for example, that in one section, she and Bianca and Ian are strolling someplace from
Mhm.
point A to point B, and she says, "No, that would take hours. So grab a cab or something."
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, now that you mention it, it would be a long trip. So that was it. And you know what? YouTube is
Mhm.
wonderful. I rewatched some of these festivals on YouTube,
Yeah.
obviously the internet, and I read so much Japanese literature, fiction, nonfiction, and I write book reviews. So I'm really committed sort of to that. I feel like I'm in
Mhm.
the zone, kind of, it's in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, you really bring Kyoto to the reader.
I'm glad.
Just the imagery, the food. You talk about the food and the smells and the sights and like it's really deep. You feel like you're there when you're reading.
I couldn't ask for better comment. Thank you, because, you know, I really wanted to bring the parts of Kyoto that you might not get to on a tour, right?
Yeah.
So I did a couple of those places, but mostly it was about what it feels like to just be there and walk the streets and, like you said, smell and eat and, you know, and the overall feeling. And there is, since I don't live there because they work very hard and very long hours, but since I don't live there, when I'm there, I find it very relaxing. It is a very Zen place, even if it doesn't seem like they're practicing Zen at all times for some reason. The presentation of everything, they take their time. You never feel rushed ever. There's no noise, no crime. It's just such an unusual place. Now, it happens to be overrun with tourists now, but if you kind of can find a way to not be around the tourists, it still has that, the city.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So yeah, you've just made me want to visit even more.
I know. I keep
Yeah.
telling people too many tourists, but everybody I talk to, I'm like, go, it's wonderful. You'll love it. So I'm probably contributing significantly to the over tourism in Kyoto. But yeah, it's wonderful. And I love it so much. And now that I have it in my head, I've been writing. I know before we wrap up, you're going to ask me what's next. So I'll tell you
Yeah.
what. I'm writing 2 novellas that are set in Japan and a few short stories. I'd like to package one novella and a few short stories into one
Mhm.
book. We'll see.
Oh,
And of course, I'm outlining other works for the Batavia-on-Hudson series. Although I don't have a date for the next book, I have like 6 more plots out there that I need to work on. So I'm
mhm.
really, yeah, I have lots of fun things I want to do with the characters there. I think I'll take her back to Japan and a few more books, and because she's going to have to go back. Her son is there, unless he comes home, but I don't think he will. Looks like my son did it.
It'll be interesting. I mean, because you've got that growth and he'll grow in his community and girlfriends and family. And so, I mean, you've got a lot of
A lot to
traveling
work
she can
with
do.
there. Yeah, exactly. And it gives her something, there's continuity there, but it's also a little bit of variety. And I was so excited when I started writing the first book. I knew the third book was going to be in Japan. I always had it in my head. And I always said that whenever I was interviewed. And I said, well, what if people don't want it in Japan? What if they just want to be in Batavia? So then I had that challenge, like we talked about, of making sure that people were situated in Batavia too, you know.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, I guess we need to go for today because this has been so much fun. But I do know that you do book events, conferences, bookshops. Can you tell us a little bit about what's in your calendar coming up?
Yeah, so I'm a snowbird. I'm going to be leaving here in a few weeks, and I'll be going straight to Malice Domestic to the conference in Bethesda the end of April. Will you be there?
I will.
Oh,
I'll,
good. we'll actually meet in
Yeah.
person. And then I probably will go to Crime Bake. I go every year in November
Mhm.
to England Crime Bake. Sometimes I go to Sleuth Fest. They moved to the other side of Florida, so it's a little bit harder for me to go, but I may go. The C3 conference, which is crime, creatures, crimes, and creativity, a nice
Yeah.
intimate conference. I really enjoy that. So I'll probably be doing those or most of those this year. I'm a maven from the Upper Hudson Sisters in Crime, and we have events going on. So I think the next one is at the Barnes and Noble in Poughkeepsie, New York. If you're in the area, hold on, May 18th, I think. May 18th. Okay, we'll be there. A few of us will be there. What else? Some virtual stuff coming up. I desperately need to update my website because that's where my events usually are, but I haven't been
Yeah.
updated. But I'll definitely be at Malice. That'll be my first thing when I arrive back up north.
Terrific. I'm excited to see you and to finally get to meet you in person.
Too. This is so nice, Jenny. You ask great questions. You read so thoroughly, and your questions are probing and really, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for visiting us. And Partners in Crime, we will see you later and check out Tina at all the different places she's going to be because there are a lot of them. I'll put a link to her website in the show notes so that you can see that as soon as she gets her website
A
updated.
link to my behind the scenes, way behind website, but it'll get caught up. It will when I get back up north. Thank you, Gina,
Perfect.
so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, Partners
Oh,
in
and
Crime.
follow me on social media. That's more up to date,
Okay, great. Yeah.
right? More up
Yeah,
to
I
date.
will add those links as well.